What is going on, yo? Welcome back to another episode of Wednesday Football Talk Show here with Ben Hall and my guy Trey Watson. This week in the NFL, we're starting to see some teams who started off the year very hot and not play so well lately. And in college, we're actually we know what the playoff is now. We also know some of the New Year's Day bowls and stuff like that. So before we get into it, how you doing today, Trey?
Doing all right, man. A lot of stuff going on in the football world, like you said, and it's Christmas time too, so a lot going on everywhere right now.
So for our first game on Thursday, we had the Chargers versus Raiders game. Derek Carr got hurt in early in that game, and Marcus Mariota had to step in, and he actually played pretty well for the Raiders. They took a tough loss to the Chargers, but overall, I think Mariota really did play well for having to step into that situation. And for the Chargers, Herbert played great once again. He didn't have a healthy Keenan Allen. You could tell watching that game, Allen was not healthy. But guys like Jalen Guyton, Hunter Henry, and Tyron Johnson really stepped up for him, and Henry really got them the ball, and that was really what won them the game. But on the other side of the ball for the Raiders, Darren Waller played really, really well, but once again, the Raiders just really didn't seem to get the run game going. But that was a tough loss for them. They're still in playoff consideration, but it's not looking likely that they'll make the playoffs after that loss.
Yeah, man, I think, Marcus Mariota came in and played as well as you can expect given the situation, and probably better than a lot of Raiders fans expected, just with everything going on. He hadn't played really at all this year. So that was, good to see for him to bounce back and prove something, but obviously in the end they couldn't pull it off. The Raiders just have fallen into a slump since that second Chiefs game. Their defense is looking really bad, honestly, overall. They just haven't been able to stop anybody since. And just their hopes right now are really dim.
For our next game on Saturday, the Bills versus Broncos game, it was a really one-sided game. Early on, it was at halftime, I think it was a one-score game, but in the second half, the Bills just took over. Josh Allen threw for 359 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley both had 100-plus yards. So I stated this before. I think Stephon Diggs has just been the difference for the Bills this year. Josh Allen's had a good year, and I think a lot of that has to do with Stephon Diggs being on this team and having a very reliable target in Diggs. And you also have Beasley as well, who's always been a tough target in NFL as a whole. But for the Broncos, Noah Fant played well, but other than that, they really did not look good at all. But for the Bills clinched the AFC East for the first time since 1995, I believe. So it's good for them. A lot of that help is now that Brady is out of the division, but it was good to see the Bills clinch the division for the first time in many years.
Yeah, man, the Bills are looking really good. Just overall, they played, the way they needed to play as of late. And with the Steelers, in a slump, they're kind of in prime position to take over, that number 2 threat underneath the Chiefs for the AFC. But I agree with you. I think Stephon Diggs has been a huge part of their success just because he's stepped up as that number 1 guy, and Cole Beasley's had a dominant season as well. And both of those have probably contributed to Josh Allen's, confidence going up a ton. And he's looking, like the top quarterback people wanted him to be. But they're in prime position heading into the playoffs. They look like they're firing on all cylinders. Defense looks a lot better than it did early on in the year. And, it was just a tough one for Denver. Denver is in, obviously, rebuild mode going into next year.
So for our next game, the Saturday night game, the Panthers versus Green Bay game, this was closer than people expected, especially given what happened in the first half. The Panthers had some costly turnovers, especially at the goal line on the fumble. But if they punch that in or hold on to the ball and kick a field goal, we might see a different outcome in the game just because the Packers just couldn't get anything really going with their passing game. Besides that, Aaron Jones in the run game really, really played well. And we both stated in previous weeks that the Packers have to get him involved. And when they did, he had 145 rushing yards and a touchdown, which is just crazy. Devontae Adams struggled a bit, and so did Aaron Rodgers. Usually when Adams doesn't do too much, Rodgers doesn't as either. But for the Panthers, DJ Moore had 135 or 131 yards, I believe. So Big game out of him. When he's been healthy, we've seen this a ton. He's one of the best receivers from his draft class. And actually, I read, I think on Maryland's Twitter, that Maryland is the only school to have two players have 1,000+ yards, I believe, or some stat like that, which is pretty incredible. Given with DJ Moore and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, man, I think that game was really interesting. The biggest thing was just the fact that the Packers' offense was essentially shut down in that second half. That hasn't happened a lot this year, maybe besides that Vikings game and the Bucks game early on in the season. But the Panthers, played it close. Like you said, if they didn't have that fumble at the 1-yard line, it's a different game entirely. And, the fact that they were still able to keep it close to the end is a testament to them. And, they have some good pieces, just haven't been able to put it together all year long. Like you said, DJ was hurt for a period. They had the period where Teddy was out, and obviously they've been missing, their best player all year long. So he probably should just stay out for the rest of the year. They get ready for next season. They just fired their GM as well. So they've got to figure out, what they're going to do moving forward as a team. But the Packers definitely needed that run game to get going. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams will have a bounce back game next week and get ready for the playoffs. But when they're balanced with the run and the pass, their offense is among the best.
So for our next game, the Colts versus Texans, this was a really, really good game. I'm going to continue to say what I said all year. Deshaun Watson needs some help, and he still gets it done with less help. He had 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's just incredible. I think, like I've said, I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL, if not the most talented, because the stuff he can do with his arm, he can just do the same stuff running the ball. So I just think he's different, and I think they need to get him some help, especially next year. They can't in the draft just because they traded the draft pick away, but if it's free agency or wherever, they need to do something to get him a little bit of help. And we're also seeing Will Fuller, who's going to be a free agent. So if they let his number one target go from last year and now they let Will Fuller go, that's just not a good thing for them to do. But for the Colts, they played really well. Zach Pascal had like 78 yards and 2 touchdowns, so it was a pretty big day for him. Phillip Rivers actually played pretty well. And the final play wasn't the final play, but the biggest play of the game late when Darius Leonard forced the fumble on Kiki Kuti, I think. Darius Leonard has been the rock for that defense all year. He's really made plays every single way, and he's the heart of that defense, like I said. So if he continues to play the way he has, this Colts team will be, as long as they get into the playoffs, this Colts team will be pretty dangerous in the playoffs just by the way that their defense plays. And if the offense can put some points up and do what they need to do, the Colts can make a pretty good run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think, the last couple of years, all the Colts-Texans games have been, good games for whatever reason, even when one team isn't as hot. But, that's partly because of Deshaun Watson, like you mentioned, just being able to make it work no matter what he has at his disposal. It'll be interesting to see what they can do to get him help in the offseason. They don't have a whole lot of cap space to work with, and like you said, no draft picks, so that doesn't bode well. They definitely need to start with signing Will Fuller back just to keep something because it's better than nothing. But I definitely agree with you about Darius Leonard. He's been playing like an all-pro since he came into the league. He's made multiple game-winning plays like that for them. I'm pretty sure even last year when they played the Texans, he sealed the deal with a pick, and that was when he went viral for stiff-arming Kenny Stills. So, he always makes plays. That's what he's been doing since he came into the league, and he showed why he's one of the best linebackers in the game.
So for the next game, the Lions versus Titans game, this was a close game for a while. Detroit really was competitive. Matt Stafford played pretty well. I think Stafford's played pretty good. He's always been a pretty good quarterback in the NFL. He's tough. I don't dislike him. I thought he played well on Sunday, but Tennessee was just too good for the Lions, even though, the Lions had 1 or 2 costly turnovers. I think one was at the goal line, just like the Packers, and I think they also had the tight end on the end around reach out for the first down and the ball get punched out. So if you take those away, I think this game is a different outcome. But Derrick Henry, once again is in his form at this point in the season. He had 147 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, which is expected of him at this point in the year, which is just crazy to say. But overall, I think the Titans are playing good football. And for the Lions, DeAndre Swift had 2 touchdowns. So to see, the Lions are definitely out of the playoffs, but getting a rookie running back a little bit of confidence late in the season could really help boost it at the beginning of next season. And maybe next year, they might be a little bit of a better team and have a chance to compete for the playoffs.
Yeah, man, I think the Titans look good. They look like, they're a confident team, and they're, doing what they really have done the last couple of years as the season winds down, getting ready for the playoffs, keeping Derrick Henry, well fed, and he's looking like Derrick Henry. But I agree, man. The Lions, they didn't look bad. Matt Stafford has always been really good. He's always put up, really solid numbers without really having any weapons besides when he had Calvin Johnson for a couple of years. But the team has some pieces. Obviously, they're looking for a new head coach, new GM, all that stuff. So they'll be figuring that out. But they definitely have a quarterback to build around, at least for the next couple of years. And getting Swift carries and confidence definitely helps going into next year.
So for our next game, the Atlanta versus Tampa Bay, this game was very unexpected. Early on, at least, Atlanta took a huge lead, which I really didn't expect, and then they blew it, which they've done a ton this year and in the past. Tom Brady once again came back and took down Atlanta. He did it when he was in New England, and now he did it again with Tampa Bay. He had 390 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but in the first half, I don't even think he had 100. So he really turned it on in the second half. Mike Evans and Antonio Brown stepped up for him. They both played really well. But for the Falcons, Matt Ryan played really well early. Overall, he threw for 356 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I think the big thing for him was Calvin Ridley and the success that he had. Calvin Ridley, I don't believe, was selected for the Pro Bowl, which is just insane to me. Ridley's had a really good year, and he's arguably one of the best wide receivers in football. He's also playing alongside one of the best wide receivers in football with Julio Jones. But Julio's been out a lot this year, and Ridley's really stepped up when they needed him to. He had 10 catches, 163 yards, and a touchdown. So for the Falcons, I think this is disappointing given the fact they blew this loss. But I guess, like we said with last week with draft picks, there's no reason to – I won't say there's no reason to win this game, but losing this game really, really doesn't hurt them at this point in the year.
Yeah, for sure, man. I told my friend who's a Falcons fan, it was a lose-lose when it got to that point in the third quarter. And everyone started talking about comebacks because either they blow the lead and, they get laughed at for blowing the lead, or they win the game and, probably get a worse draft pick. So at least, they didn't get the worst draft pick. They can get clowned just like they get clowned for all the other blown leads this year in the 28-3. But that's just something that, unfortunately, Matt Ryan has been unable to shake regular season or, in the Super Bowl. He has 0 fourth-quarter comeback wins this year or fourth-quarter game-winning drives. And I'm pretty sure, there's some quarterbacks out there that are a lot less talented than Matt Ryan who can at least say they have won this season. So that part is definitely tough to hear if you're a Matt Ryan fan. Just doesn't matter how good you play, if you're only playing, half a game, 3 quarters or whatnot. Missed a big throw late on the post route, had a guy open, probably could have, scored on that play or at least been in position to take the lead. But they didn't. And, Tom Brady and the Bucs did just enough in the second half to come back. Just looks like it's something that's bound to happen between him and the Falcons.
So for our next game, the Ravens-Jaguars game, the Ravens looked good. I mean, given the fact that they're playing against the Jaguars, doesn't mean that much. But in my opinion, I think the Ravens' offense is starting to look as close to last year's offense as it has all year. Coming into this year, a lot of people, including myself, expected a lot out of the Ravens, and they really have not produced or given what anybody thought. It seems like they're starting to establish the run game early on in the game, which then opens up the passing game, which I've been saying they needed to do all year. On Sunday, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, I think those two running backs together are two of the best in all of football as a together running back set. They both, every time they get the ball, make plays. And Lamar really, really played well, except for his one interception early in the game. But we saw Des Bryant get a touchdown, which was awesome to see. He's worked so hard, and he finally got back, and now he's got a touchdown, which was great. And but for the Jaguars, with the Jets winning, now they have the first pick, and they're probably going to keep that first pick and take Trevor Lawrence, I'm guessing. So I don't know if this loss was really bad for the Jaguars. Gardner Minshew actually played pretty well, but I think looking forward, if you're a Jaguars fan, you would much rather have Trevor Lawrence than Gardner Minshew, but I'm not exactly sure how they feel. But yeah, like I said, this loss really does not hurt them. And now with the Jets winning, they have the number one pick in next year's draft.
Yeah, man, I'm pretty sure I saw some. I don't know if it was the Jacksonville mayor or who it was, but they basically thanked the Jets for blowing it, which is crazy because the team won a game, and they blew the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. But Jacksonville definitely will take that. They are, in the process of rebuilding their team and putting the pieces back together. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence would be a nice place to start with that. But I think the Ravens, they look a lot more comfortable than they did early in the year. Guys are getting their confidence back. Specifically, Lamar, Hollywood Brown looks like he's gaining confidence. He had a really rough patch in the middle of the season. Getting more guys involved. It's crazy though that their running game is being spurred by Dobbins and Gus Edwards instead of Mark Ingram. The guy who's probably one of the top guys in the league in terms of active rushing yards, probably behind like Frank Gore and AP. But they found guys that are working right now, and it's definitely helping them. And their O-line looks like they're gaining some more confidence after they had a couple injuries, and they're in a good place to compete and earn that wild card spot.
And speaking of Mark Ingram, he was actually a healthy scratch this past Sunday, which is just incredibly crazy to think about. I've loved Mark Ingram since he's been in Baltimore, and I guess the team does what they need to do, but I don't think he should be a healthy scratch ever just because, he's one good. That's another thing. Ravens fans don't give him his credit. They complain a lot, which pisses me off. And Mark Ingram has, as you said, he's probably one of the leading active rushers in the NFL as it is right now. But Mark Ingram has meant a lot to this Ravens team between last year and this year and has contributed to a ton of the team's success. So it's kind of just frustrating hearing people kind of bash him, and there's no need for it. But on to the next game, the Patriots versus Dolphins game. The Patriots defense just really couldn't stop Miami's run game. Salvon Ahmed had 122 yards and Matt Breida had 86. So two running backs had 80 plus yards, which is pretty crazy. But like I said, the Patriots were eliminated from the playoffs with this loss, and it was kind of expected. In the picks this week, I took the Patriots. I mean, I really didn't think the Patriots would win, but I just needed some luck or something to go my way. But like I said, the Dolphins are just playing really good football right now. Their defense is playing good. And the Patriots, on offense, I just think they need to fix it once they get into the opposing team's territory. It seems like they get across the 50 and they just their drive just kind of get halted. Whether it's Cam missing a few throws, the run game can't get going, whatever. I don't know what it is. I think Cam will be the quarterback next year. I've always been a huge Cam Newton fan. He struggled this year, but before his COVID injury or whatever it would be called, before he got COVID, he was really playing good. And after that, we've kind of seen him go down a little bit. But Cam always works really hard, and I think this offseason he'll show that. And it also hurt the Patriots not having Damian Harris, who was out with injury. So the Patriots won't be in the playoffs this year, but Belichick will figure a way next year to get back in.
Yeah, man, I think this game was just, the times have changed a little bit in the AFC East. We already talked about the Bills winning the division. The Dolphins are as confident as ever right now. Besides, the Broncos hiccup, they played really good football for a majority of the season. And, it's a much different league, and both teams are much different than they were week one when they played the first time. And we saw that in the game. The Dolphins look confident that their defense is aggressive and moving around. And the offense is figuring out what they want to do, which they want to run the ball. They've got some young rookie offensive linemen who are playing really well, real physical guys, and they're taking advantage of it no matter who's that running back. Tua's looking confident. He's making the throws that he needs to make, and that's even without some weapons out there, which they'll probably be getting back in time for the playoffs, if they're able to finish it out.
So for our next game, the Seahawks versus Washington football team. Once again, the Washington football team defense is just phenomenal. Russell Wilson really struggled against them. I think he only had like 140 or 130 passing yards, which is just not like Russell Wilson. We never really see that out of him. I think a few games this year he's been under 200, but the Washington football team defense, as I said, has just been phenomenal. But their offense just really struggled. I thought with Dwayne Haskins coming in, that offense would have a spark, but he threw the ball 55 times. He threw for 295 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. But I think his struggles still have to do with a lack of experience. We saw, like we stated earlier a few weeks ago in the show, we saw him in college only play one season, I think, or part of a season. And then when he got drafted, he was really young and still hadn't had a lot of experience. So, he's getting pushed in against the Seahawks team, who I thought maybe he would have some success against, which, he threw for 295 yards, but he threw the ball so many times. So it's kind of expected for him to have a lot of yards. And just the football team, once their defense or once their offense can play just average compared to their defense, I think we can see them really win big games like this one. But without Antonio Gibson, I think he'll be back soon. Hopefully for them, he'll be back soon. And once they get him back, I think that offense will get a little bit more of a push and it'll be dangerous more in the running game. And that hopefully can open up the passing game for them.
Yeah, man. I think, as a team, they've done a lot to build this year in Washington. I think Seattle still is just not looking as dynamic as they did early on this season, which they'll need to change because the NFC is going to get, shaken up a little bit here coming to the playoffs. But Washington is just a couple pieces away, man. They've got to figure out the quarterback thing. They got to see if they can get more out of Dwayne. If it's Kyle Allen when he comes back next year, or maybe Alex Smith, we don't know. It definitely could be experience for Dwayne. I think, he showed, especially in college, how talented he is and, how much he can do. Maybe just when he's feeling comfortable or when he has a system down. Don't really know exactly what it is for him. Hopefully they can figure it out and he can get going. And they can get some value out of that pick. But, they've got a solid tight end now. Logan Thomas has developed. They've got Terry McLaurin, and they've had a couple other guys play well at receiver. So, they just need someone to lead them at quarterback and then, let the defense do what they need to do and keep them in games.
So now for our next game, the Bears versus the Vikings, back early in the season, we said we both agreed the Bears were the worst 5-1 or 5-2 team, whatever they were at. And, they went on like a 5-game losing streak. And now looking at them, they're playing better than they were early in the year. I think you'll agree with me. The Bears still are not good, but, they're playing better football than they were when they went on that 5-game losing streak or whatever it was. And I think that a big thing that has to do with is David Montgomery's success in the run game. On Sunday, he had 146 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, which is really good for him, given the fact that earlier in the year, we were seeing games where, I don't know if it was the offensive line not being able to block or what, but games where he would just run for 25 yards or 20 yards. And, a lot of people were expecting a big year out of him. So it was good to see him, run for so many yards in back-to-back weeks. And that's good for the Bears. I think they're still in playoff consideration, but I think they're kind of like the Raiders where it's very close to them being pushed out. But for the Vikings, Dalvin Cook had a big day running the ball. He had 132 rushing yards and a touchdown. Kirk Cousins played mediocre. He didn't really play too well. But once again, Justin Jefferson played great. He had 8 catches, 104 yards, and I think I wouldn't say Kirk Cousins is a bad quarterback. He's just inconsistent, and the numbers that Justin Jefferson is putting up with now, I'm not saying Kirk Cousins, as I said, is a bad quarterback, but it's impressive to me what Justin Jefferson has done with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. So in the future, I think that Vikings team could be very good.
Yeah, I think, the Bears have come a long way just in terms of getting anything out of the running game. When you're already having quarterback struggles, it makes it even worse when you can't, turn around and run the ball at all. It just makes those issues even more glaring. But, Trubisky coming back and starting, since he's been starting again, it looks like they have, some semblance of an offense. The running game is helping that a lot. And their defense has always been solid. But I agree on the Minnesota side, man. I think, Kirk Cousins has been up and down the last few years. And he had 2 superstar receivers before, and that kind of, would save him. And he basically has 2 superstars now because Jefferson is really just filling that role and making plays every single week that lets you know he's going to be good for a while.
So now our next game, the Los Angeles Rams and the New York Jets. I'll start with some positives for the Jets. We saw Ty Johnson, who we talked about before in the show, score a touchdown in the passing game. He had 6 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown, and he had 3 rushes for 16 yards. I don't want to bash the Jets, but usually when a guy is doing well, when they have the ball in their hands, you should give it to them more, which we've said this enough on the show. The Jets need to when someone does well with the ball, they need to give him the ball. So I think the Jets need to give him the ball more. But, given that the Jets won a game early in the year, if you would have asked me, I would have said there's no way a team goes winless. And then you see them run a cover 0 on a Hail Mary late in the game against the Raiders and stuff like that. It kind of seemed like they're really not going to win a game. But they pulled this one out somehow. They were up big early and then they blew it. It was a tie game and they ended up still winning it. Just not a good day at all for the Rams. Cam Akers played iffy. But the big thing here was just the Jets not having the first pick anymore. You don't tell, like I said, you can't complain about your team winning. I know Jets fans want Trevor Lawrence bad, and I would as well if I was in that situation. But, your team just beat a really good Rams team. In the long term, I don't know how good that win will be for the Jets, but that you can't ask your team to lose a game. And they're also moving to the second pick, and I'm a pretty big fan of Justin Fields. I know we're going to talk about it later. He didn't really play too well in the Big Ten championship game, but earlier in the year, he's proved he could be just as good or if not better than Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in this draft, but you don't really know. And Fields also seems like he can do a little bit more in the running than Trevor Lawrence can. So maybe that loss really, or that win really won't hurt the Jets. If they can get Justin Fields, and with that offensive line, Fields is a little bit more mobile than Lawrence is and could maybe make some more plays than Lawrence can with that offensive line. So we'll see. But yeah, it was just surprising to see the Jets get their first win against who was a hot Rams team.
Yeah, man, I think, that'll be the storyline for a while and really up until the draft and that gets sorted out, who ends up picking who and who goes where. But, man, it's hard, to think that they're upset or fans or, everyone is upset about a win, in professional sports. Like you said, you can't ask a team to actually go out there and lose, even if that's, what the owner and the head coach and the GM wanted to actually happen. So it is what it is. You kind of just have to live with it. I really don't think anyone expected the Rams to lay an egg. They had looked pretty good for the majority of the year. But obviously, the Jets showed they can hang. They were right there and, should have beaten the Raiders besides that, ridiculous call. And, if one call is different, now they would have had 2 wins and would have been even further from Trevor Lawrence. So there's always that to think about too, man. But, they're still in the running, like you said, to get a first, second pick. Either way, they're going to get someone who can change the face of that franchise. And, hopefully it can, if it's Lawrence, if it's Fields, if it's someone else, hopefully that guy can, turn things around for him.
So now for our next game, the 49ers versus Cowboys game, we saw Raheem Mostert go down early. I think he had like 68 yards or something like that before he got hurt. So, he's shown he's very, very talented running back, but once again, we see him get hurt. So I think the 49ers, especially with them having no shot at making the playoffs now, need to just, it's hard to tell a guy not to play, but hopefully, they don't get him hurt again, because once they're fully healthy next year or midway through next year, whenever they actually are fully healthy, I think Mostert is going to be their star back. But also Brandon Ayuk for them played really well. He had 9 catches and 73 yards and a touchdown. But they still lost this game. Either team who won this game, I'm not exactly sure. I think the Cowboys still might have a possible chance at making the playoffs. I don't know. I think any team in the NFC East might have a chance, but it was just kind of like I won't say boring game, but it wasn't as exciting, just given the fact that both these teams really aren't too good. But for the Cowboys, one good thing was Tony Pollard. Ezekiel Elliott was a late scratch, and Ezekiel Elliott has not played great this year. He's been one of the best backs in the NFL for the whole year, and he really just has not shown it this year. But Tony Pollard played great, and we're going to see him a lot more in the future. And also CeeDee Lamb, who was one of the best wide receivers coming out of the draft, also played really well for them. So I think the Cowboys have a pretty bright future, as long as in the front office, they can fix some things and do some smart things in the future.
Yeah, man, it's a tough game to watch, man, just because obviously the Cowboys have been so bad this year, and they've had injuries too. And then San Francisco just has had more injuries than probably any team ever. So many big name guys going down. It's just not the game you probably would have expected that to be at the beginning of the year, and didn't have a ton of significance. I guess it does because somehow the Cowboys could still get in if the Redskins and Eagles lost some games, but we're not even going to stress that too much. But it's just tough. I agree. It was a good sign for Tony Pollard. They have 2 solid running backs there. Once they get Ezekiel Elliott back to form, and they do have a talented receiver room. CeeDee Lamb can make a ton of plays, and then obviously, like you said, Ayuk on the other side is a talented young receiver. Both teams, when they get healthy and they figure a couple things out, could and should be competitive moving forward. And I know that's the expectation for both of those franchises.
So now for our next game, the Eagles versus Cardinals. This was a really exciting game to watch, just because we saw 2 great offenses, or dynamic offenses, play really well. The Eagles have been a completely different team since Jalen Hurts has taken that starting job. And like I said last week, I think, I just saw a lot of people before Hurts got the starting job, complain and say they didn't think Hurts was going to be anything. But like I said, the leadership he has and the skill and talent he has just, to me, showed he was going to be good and he was going to make something happen. And like Miles Sanders said, he gave them a spark. He had 338 passing yards and 3 touchdowns and 63 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. You don't normally ever see a quarterback throw for that many yards and also run for that many yards. So he's definitely that team's future quarterback, I believe. Reports came out that Wentz wanted out if he wasn't the starting quarterback. And I think Wentz still could be a good quarterback in the NFL. But if Philadelphia moves on or benches Jalen Hurts and puts Wentz back in at any point this year, barring injury, I just think that's not smart at all and wouldn't make any sense to me, or I hope anybody else who watches football. Now, for the Cardinals, Kyler Murray threw for 406 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that was just crazy to me, because Kyler Murray has, at the beginning of the year, played great football, and then in the middle of the year, he slowed down and wasn't playing too well, but he really got the job done against the Eagles. DeAndre Hopkins was a big factor in that. Now, it's not a similar situation, but I think DeAndre Hopkins has had the same effect on Kyler Murray that Stephon Diggs has on Josh Allen. Adding somebody of that talent to a team is just easily and quickly going to change the passing game. So once you get a guy like that, a lot of targets, they're going to catch the ball and they're going to make plays. And we saw that on Sunday with the Arizona Cardinals. So looking forward, I'm not sure. I don't believe the Cardinals will get in, but I think with maybe a few adjustments and maybe a couple of additions in the offseason, Arizona could definitely be one of the main teams to beat in the NFC next year.
Yeah, man, I think the Cardinals are definitely a growing team and have a lot of really strong weapons on both sides of the ball. This game kind of got going after DeAndre Hopkins fumbled the ball by the goal line. He took his gloves off, threw them on the ground, and basically the rest of the game he was dominant. Now, this is against, the Eagles secondary, who basically was a bunch of practice squad guys. They all got signed and elevated. I think the only starter they had left was Jalen Mills. And they were moving him around, trying to make it work. But DeAndre Hopkins dominates all pro, cornerbacks. So it was only bound to happen that he was going to do it versus, those kind of guys. But Jalen Hurts was able to keep the game close. They were able to make a lot of plays on offense. And like you said, there's no reason to go back to Wentz right now just because it just wouldn't make any sense. And Wentz's feelings seem to be hurt. And that makes sense. Anytime, you're a starter and you've been starting for so long and played well at times in his career, it's hard to fathom that, you can be benched. But this year just has not been very good for him. It hasn't been good for the franchise. And, they're going to do what's in the best interest moving forward. And they'll have to figure out what that is after this season.
For our next game, the Saints versus Chiefs, this was another really exciting game. Patrick Mahomes and his weapons didn't have as big of a game as they had the past few weeks. Whether it was Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill, one of the two would have 100 plus and a couple of touchdowns in the past few weeks. But this week, Kelce got a touchdown. I believe Hill did. I can't remember, but they both had less than 70 receiving yards. I think one of them had like 60 and the other one had 40 some. So we didn't really see as much excitement for those as we have in previous weeks. But in the run game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a great game before getting injured. I believe he has a high ankle sprain, which isn't good. But with them signing Le'Veon Bell earlier this year, Le'Veon Bell was a really good running back before coming there. And if he can do anything similar to what he has before, they're really not going to be taking a step back in the run game. But for New Orleans, early on, you could definitely see they were flat. Drew Brees, it was his first game back, so I wasn't really expecting him to start off the game on fire. But the second half, he had a much better performance. No Michael Thomas definitely hurt them. He was put on the IR, I believe, so he'll be out until the playoffs, I'm guessing, which is tough for them and tough for him, who was a guy coming into this year who was in the argument for best wide receiver in football. And this year, he hasn't been active. He's been hurt. And when he's played, he really just hasn't performed that well. That's also hurt not having Drew Brees healthy all year, but it just hasn't been the year for him. New Orleans is still a great team. And I think, they only lost this game by a small number of points. So this was the game of the week, I think. And in the future, you had earlier on in the year, these two as your Super Bowl teams. So we might still see that.
Yeah, it potentially could. I'm not as confident in the Saints right now just because, like you said, they've been going back and forth at quarterback. The receiver options have been low with Thomas being gone and various other guys being hurt. But, on the other side, the Chiefs look as good as ever. They were able to get it done. I expected a competitive game, a close one. Like you said, there weren't as many big plays from the Chiefs, but, they had some crazy touchdowns in the red zone. Finished drives off when they needed to and made a lot of plays regardless.
So now for our next game, the Sunday night football game, it was a pretty good game. The Giants only lost by 14, but the Giants had some peaks this year. They beat Seattle. They did some good things, but it just doesn't make sense to me with their I mean, everybody who watched that game knows the fake field goal or whatever they want to call it was a horrible, horrible play. But, they were in the red zone so much and they were so close to scoring. And if they score a touchdown once out of those drives, this is a different game. They were running fake field goals, going for it, just not being very smart. But, they should have been way more competitive. And on the other side of the ball for the Browns, Baker played pretty well. He threw for about 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Higgins has been great for him. Jarvis Landry's been really good. So we're seeing the Browns offense play much better than it was earlier in the year. With James Bradbury out for the Giants, that definitely hurt them, and it made it easier for the Browns offense. But the passing offense for the Browns was much better than the run offense. I think Chubb only had like 50-some yards, but he had a touchdown. So, we'll see how the Browns do in the next few weeks. They take on the Jets and the Steelers, I believe. So if the Steelers lose to the Colts this week and the Browns win, week 17 will be for the AFC North. So crazy to think about that right now. The Browns have a chance to win the AFC North, but that's just been how 2020 has went. And a lot of surprises. And like I said, we could see the Browns win the AFC North.
Yeah, man, I think, the Browns came alive at the right time. It'd be even crazier, if they had been able to finish off the Ravens, if Lamar Jackson had to come out of the locker room to save them. But I think they're in a good position as a team right now, man. Baker's gained a lot of confidence. That he's found some guys, that he trusts weapon-wise. Donovan Peoples-Jones has gotten really involved in their offense as well. And the running game, they can lean on that whenever they need to. And their defense is making enough plays to win them games. And right now, the Steelers are just not in the same position that they were in even a couple of weeks ago. They've lost a lot of confidence on both sides of the ball, I'd say. Some due to injuries and others due to just poor performance. But the Browns are in the position they want to be in, man, and they kind of control what happens. So it'll be interesting next 2 weeks to see as far as that division.
So now for our last game of the week, Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati. This was a surprise in terms of the outcome, but Ben Roethlisberger looked so bad on Sunday. It's just unbelievable. I have brought a lot of biasness into this show in the past few weeks, and I just think that the fact all the Steelers fans and people in the sports media want to say, make Lamar throw, and that's how you beat the Ravens, which is just completely false. But now I think maybe they should start saying, make Ben Roethlisberger throw, and that's how you beat the Steelers, because that's what it looked like against the Bengals last night. The Steelers just they looked flat. It was hard for Steelers fans to watch, I'm sure. And for the Bengals, they got the job done. If Joe Burrow plays in that game, I think the Bengals win by 21 plus. Ryan Finley made some huge plays, don't get me wrong. But there were a few throws that if he maybe just makes a little bit of a better throw, result in a touchdown or result in a first down and their drive keeps going, they get more points. For example, the one throw to T. Higgins. T. Higgins had Cam Sutton beat easy by like 3 or 4 yards, and Finley underthrew him, which was fine. He still got the win, but if he just makes a fine throw there, that game is put away then. But in the run game, Ryan Finley just made the Steelers defense look crazy, which I did not expect. The one rushing touchdown he had, I just couldn't believe it. Alex Highsmith, the rookie from Charlotte, I believe, just completely guessed to the running back, and that allowed Finley to get to the outside. And, he showed a lot of speed and scored the touchdown. And then later in the game, they continued to run the option with him because it was clearly working. Bud Dupree being out definitely hurts the Steelers because you can tell in the option. TJ Watt, he just didn't have as good of a game. He was committing to the running back a lot in the option game, and I think that hurt them a little bit. But overall, like I said, the Steelers just look really flat, and this is not the time of the year that they want to be looking like this. But I think the Steelers, as I said before, I'm not a fan of the Steelers. I don't like the Steelers, but I think they'll figure some things out, and I don't think they'll lose. I think they'll either win 1 or 2 of their next 2 games. They'll either beat the Colts or they'll beat the Browns, and they'll win the AFC North this year. That's just what I think.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I just don't know what to think of the Steelers right now, just because they just don't have an identity offensively at all. They've had injuries, but normally, you always think of the Steelers as a tough physical team, which that's kind of what they showed early on in the season and why they were undefeated for so long. But they have essentially no run game right now. Even last night, they weren't able to run on the Bengals, which if you're not gonna be able to run against them, then there's not a whole lot of competitive playoff teams that you're going to be able to do that on either. And then passing wise, it just didn't look good. When the announcers and everyone on Twitter is calling you out for bad passes and, saying, you missed reads, you know, that's not a good look. People think they can see things, but when they actually see them and they're like, oh, that was a terrible throw. Yeah, it doesn't look good. Ben threw however many picks, but he probably should have thrown, 3 or 4 more. William Jackson dropped one. There were 3 guys who ran into each other and dropped another one on the same play that Ben had Chase Claypool open for a touchdown. So it just wasn't a good look for him on offense, man. Then on defense, they couldn't get any stops. Ryan Finley made all the plays that he needed to make and probably could have had more, like you said. So it's just tough for, that to be the way the Steelers season is going right now. 3 losses in a row. And with two games coming up that, they can win. Definitely no saying that they can't, but it's not going to be as easy as it maybe would have seemed a couple weeks ago.
So now before we get into our college football, I want to say 2 more things about that game. First off, late in the game, I think it was during the beginning of the 4th quarter. I can't remember what defensive back made the play, but there was a pass to Juju Smith, and the guy batted it down on 3rd and 3, I believe. And he crossed his arms and looked at Juju, I think, or something small like that. The refs call a flag, and the Steelers had a holding, so the flag's offset. But to me, I said this last week. I'm going to continue to say it because these refs need to be called out. I'm sick and tired of every single week these refs making the game about themselves. Most importantly, nobody cares about what their calls really are. Obviously, you call the obvious stuff, but one, he did not make any physical contact with the guy. He literally looked at him for 3 seconds or 2 seconds after one of the biggest plays of the game, which would have been, he batted the ball down, would have forced the punt if the ref didn't call the flag. And here come the Zebras, come out, throw the flag, and just ruin it. So, it's just frustrating to me every single week when I watch football. Like, you have to deal with this. Like, I don't know how else to get it out, but it just pisses me off because every week I feel like I'm watching a game and a player does one different or one small move, and the ref's got to run in and throw a 15-yard penalty. And if there wasn't a holding called there, that call could have literally changed the game on a 3rd and 3 where he crossed his arms and looked at the guy. So, like I said, and also that could be affecting guys' paychecks. I'm not sure how it will or if it will affect it, but I know sometimes guys get fined for unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. So I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure what the rule is, but if he is fined for that, 1, the ref needs to be fined, and 2, that guy should not be paying $1 for crossing his arms and staring at Juju Smith after he batted the ball down. But my second point, I want to ask you, last night when I was watching the game, Ben Roethlisberger was throwing the ball underneath a lot, and Anthony McFarland really didn't get used a lot. This might just be some biasness because I'm a Maryland fan, but I feel like when he was at Maryland, he made so many plays in the passing game, and I feel like the Steelers could really use that on their offense right now. So I just wanted to see kind of what you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, their offense just is out of sync right now, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. They have Benny Snell, and they want him to be their power guy, and that's great. But then, he's in on 3rd down, and he's running the check down routes and stuff like that. That's not what he's good at. That's not what he's ever been good at, and probably just won't be. So I don't know why they're using him in that role a ton, and not putting it in there. I saw the broadcasters a couple weeks ago when they said Ant should have caught that whatever sluggo route they threw, or that Ben threw. That they said that was on him. That was a bad throw. Maybe he could have caught it, yeah, but I mean, making your receiver who's wide open have to adjust and reverse his shoulders. People don't understand how hard that is to do, especially, when you're a smaller guy having to jump up in the air and do that at the same time. That could have been an easy over-the-shoulder throw and, walk-in touchdown, but it wasn't. I don't know if that has anything to do with, Ant not playing as much, or maybe it's the scheme, or maybe they're worried about, him picking up blockers. But they also have Jalen Samuel in there who's, probably the same size as Ant and not nearly as dynamic with the ball in his hands. But, those are coaching decisions. You can always question them after the fact. But they definitely have guys who could be used in ways that they're not using them right now. And Ant is one of those guys.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I remember the exact play you're talking about, and I don't know if it's because Anthony McFarland really hasn't made a name for himself yet or what. But yeah, I saw a lot of reporters and analysis on Twitter kind of saying that should have been caught, but the ball needs to be placed where it's supposed to be, and that's just how it is. But for now, our pick'em this week, as I stated earlier, you went 5 for 5. I went 3 for 5. I needed an upset or two to try to get back into it, and that none of them went my way. So I'm hoping this week I take a couple of crazy picks and maybe they'll go my way, but we'll see. So the first game, the Washington football team, Seattle. I took the football team. You took Seattle. You won. The second pick, we both took the Cardinals to beat the Eagles. That was right. Then it was the Patriots, Dolphins. I took the Patriots. You took the Dolphins. That was right. And then we both took the Chiefs and the Browns. So you're now beating me 37-31, I believe. And I'm going to need some luck heading into late in this year to maybe turn something around. So for our first game, the Dolphins-Raiders, I'm going with the Raiders. For luck as a whole, I don't think there's any chance that the Raiders win this game. But I don't think you're going to take the Raiders, so I'm going with the Raiders. I need the Raiders to win this game. Hopefully Mariota can make the Dolphins' great defense look bad. I don't see it happening, but the Raiders got some weapons on offense, so I'm hoping that maybe they can fool the defense a little bit and score some points and upset the Dolphins. So we'll see, but I'm going to go with the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go with the Dolphins, man. I feel like no matter who's at quarterback, the Dolphins defense is playing well enough to stop the Raiders. I think it'll be tough to slow down Waller, and probably Aguilar in the passing game. Those guys have been dynamic all year, but I just don't think it'll be enough, and I don't see enough confidence in that Raiders defense to get the job done.
So now for our next game, the Colts Steelers. I'm gonna go with the Steelers. I think, like, coming off of their poor performances in 3 weeks in a row, this is like a must-win for the Steelers. Like I said before, I think the Browns are going to beat the Jets. The Jets just beat the Rams, so who knows really what's going to happen there. But if the Browns win and the Steelers lose, that like I said, that Week 17 game is for the division. So I think the Steelers are going to do everything they can to win this game. And if the Steelers win, I believe they clinch the division. So the Colts defense is not a defense that is looking pretty for the Steelers to play right now with the way the Steelers offense is played. But I think that the Steelers will figure some things out, and I think it's going to be a really close game, but I'm going to go with the Steelers.
Yeah, man, I think, any other point in the season, maybe even before this game, I probably still would have picked the Steelers. But after this many performances in a row of just subpar play, and they still got injuries piling up, and they just don't have anything going on offense. I think the Colts defense is one of the best in the NFL. Super, dynamic, and they take advantage of every opportunity. I think they'll do that with Big Ben playing the way he is right now. And I think Indianapolis offense will be able to do enough. Their O-line is probably one of the best in the league. T.Y. Hilton is playing good again, looking like his old self, and Phillip Rivers is, Phillip Rivers.
So now for our next game, the Rams Seahawks. I'm gonna go with the Seahawks. This isn't my least confident pick. The next game will be my least confident pick. But the Seahawks just have disappointed me. I think both of our Super Bowl teams in terms of the NFC have disappointed this year. The AFC, you took the Chiefs, who definitely are the favorite right now. So that's definitely not a disappointment. But in terms for the Seahawks, for me, their defense has just played so poor this year. Jamal Adams has made some plays. He sacked some quarterbacks, made some nice plays, but he really hasn't made too many plays with the ball in the air in the passing game. And I think he'll make a play against the Rams and kind of hopefully that defense will get going. Coming off of if the Rams would have won the Jets game, I would have definitely took the Rams just because they would have been hot. The Seahawks really aren't playing too good. And the Seahawks have really struggled against good defenses, as we saw in the Washington football team game. But I'm going to go with the Seahawks coming off of that Jets loss with the Rams. It's really tough to take them right now, so I definitely just have to take the Seahawks.
Yeah, man, I think, the Seahawks have just been in an interesting position this middle to late part of the season. They've been up and down a lot, some bad losses, some close wins against teams that you don't really expect, like last week. But I think, they'll find a way to get it done. They've got a guy who set the record for sacks from a DB and has missed like 4 or 5 games, which is crazy. And at the end of the day, they still have Russell Wilson. So, he'll figure some things out. I saw they got the running game going a little bit last week. Looked like Carlos Hyde gained some confidence and Chris Carson. So they'll figure some things out, and I got them handling. So
for the next game, the Titans-Packers, this was the game that I said I'm least confident about, and I'm making the pick now. I'm going to go with the Titans. The Packers defense has had some small struggles this year up front. I think, well, actually not up front with the secondary, but I think that Derrick Henry is going to have a career game. This game literally could go either way. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have a huge bounce back game, but I'm going to take the Titans just because I think the Titans are really, really hot right now. And we've seen the Packers struggle against some not as good teams so far this year. So I'm going to take the Titans. Like I said, I think this game could go either way, but I think Derrick Henry is going to be the difference in this game.
Yeah, man, I definitely feel like the running game of the Titans could take advantage. I'm still going to go with the Packers just because I feel like, Aaron Rodgers for the most part has been extremely consistent this season, and their offense looks really well-rounded when they're getting Aaron Jones involved. They got a tight end who has 10-plus touchdowns. They got Devontae Adams. They got guys that Aaron Rodgers is really comfortable with, and then their defense just makes enough plays. They've got some guys in the passing game who can be disruptive, and the Smith brothers on the edge. So I think they'll do enough to slow Derrick Henry down as much as you need to let Aaron Rodgers do what he does.
So now for our last game, in previous pick'ems, I've said that, the Steelers, who I can't remember, on Monday night. Oh, no, it was the Steelers-Washington football team game. I said that was the easiest pick we've had so far this year. We both took the Steelers. They lose. So I'm not going to say this is the easiest pick, but I'm going to take the Bills to beat the Patriots. I think the Bills are playing really good football right now, and the Patriots are struggling. Could I be wrong for the millionth time this year? Yes, but I just think that the Bills are playing too good right now, and they're very hot. So I just have the Bills taking down the Patriots.
Yeah, I've got to agree, man. Just right now, I don't see the Patriots doing anything that can slow the Bills down. They almost caught them earlier in the season, but the Bills have caught fire since then on both sides of the ball and are looking like a dominant football team.
So now, before we go, in this episode, we're not going to cover as much college football because next week's episode will be more more about college football, just because we still have a few weeks until the college football playoff. So, in terms of the championships this week, in the Big Ten championship, was a really good game for a while. Northwestern looked really, really good. They have that one defensive back. I can't think of his name right now, but he's a freshman. Him and Tarheeb Still, I think, had been two of the best cornerbacks or defensive backs in all of Big Ten, and they were both freshmen. So he had a big pick before the half on Ohio State's quarterback, which was huge for them. But Fields really never played too well throughout the whole game. But Peyton Ramsey, for Northwestern. I'm sure you've played against him before because he's been in the Big Ten for a while. But he's been good this year, but he had some costly turnovers. And the main one I can think of is the fumble he had, which really, really killed the game. But if he makes one or two different plays, I think Northwestern could have won that game. And then for Ohio State, Trey Sermon with 331 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns was just insane. All year, whether it's been him or any of the other backs, really just haven't been able to get the run game going too much, and they've been relying on the passing game a ton. But I think watching this game, in my opinion, I don't know why Ryan Day, I wouldn't say abandoned the run because he definitely didn't with the guy running for 331 yards. But I think Sermon could have rushed for even more just because how much success he was having. They still, I don't think, ran the ball enough because Northwestern had some trouble stopping the run. So coming into their next game, I think they maybe should try to establish the run a little bit early on, and hopefully that'll open up the pass for them. But yeah, like I said, it was just Northwestern kind of let the game fall out of their hands in the second half.
Yeah, man, I think it was interesting just to see Northwestern get gashed so much in the run. That's not something you expect to see from them. But I knew the game would be competitive just because that's what Northwestern's team looked like this year. They looked like, they would be able to hold the game close, keep them around and take advantage. And early on, that's exactly what they did. Like you said, Justin Fields kind of repeated what he did in the Indiana game early on in the year, which was make some plays you're not really used to seeing him make, for some things that he just didn't need to, and it let Northwestern hang around and really control the game for parts of it. But once Sermon got going, he was able to do whatever he wanted. I mean, getting 330 yards and the bulk of that being literally in one half is crazy to think about, especially when he hasn't been their feature back all year long. That definitely raises some questions about that.
So now for the next, I don't really want to talk about the ACC championship as much just because, we both given our opinion on Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was exposed once Trevor Lawrence played for Clemson. So just small about that. Clemson dominated, and it was expected. Notre Dame showed their struggles and still somehow snuck into the college football playoff, but we'll get to that after we talk about the SEC championship, which was a great game. Florida went down a lot early and were kind of fighting back throughout the rest of the game. But once you go down by so much to an Alabama team, you're really digging yourself into a hole you don't want to, because Alabama does not ever blow leads. Florida fought back into it, and a lot of that was based off of their success in the passing game. Kyle Trask played really well. Kadarius Toney, I think, really boosted his draft stock. He had a ton of receiving yards, and Kyle Pitts already has shown everything he's needed to, but he had a pretty good game as well. So I think this was a really good game for some Florida skill players to kind of boost their draft stock. They really couldn't get anything going in the run game, but for the other team, Alabama, both their running and passing was great. They played so good, but it was like it's expected with Alabama. So this was really no surprise. But I think we're going to talk about this after you talk about the SEC championship. But I think I would personally rather have Florida in the college football playoff. It's not fair; they have 3 losses, but I would rather have Florida in the college football playoff than I would Notre Dame. But I'll get into that more later.
Yeah, man, I think, that game was a great game all around. I think it showed what, Florida was really capable of. They just had some really bad lapses, against LSU and even Texas A&M, which, I know Pitts didn't play against LSU. I don't know if he did against Texas A&M or not. I know he missed a couple of games.
I think he got knocked out with injury that game.
Oh, yeah. See, so, I mean, there's all those things to think about, but, I mean, you also can't put it all on one guy. It's a team that's required to win games. But that game was exciting to watch all around. I think what really changed the scope of that game early was, the interception and then him getting blasted and giving it right back. That could have changed a lot of things, because right there, Florida had driven down the first time and scored, as easily as you could want to, and was going to get the ball right back and probably do the same thing again. And you kind of get deflated as a defense when you get an interception and the same play, your guy gets literally knocked out and you give the ball back. And then, they ended up giving up a touchdown either the play after or like 2 or 3 plays after that. And that kind of put him in a hole. So that really changed the game. That's, obviously a huge momentum swing play, and then it swings right back. That hurts worse than just giving up a touchdown by itself just because you feel like you had it in your hands and you lost it, literally. But the game was great all around, man. Like you said, so many different players made so many dynamic plays on both sides. Najee Harris had 5 touchdowns. Devontae Smith had 2. And Pitts and Tony did whatever they wanted when they had the ball in their hands too. So, it was crazy to see. But basically, in a full season, and all those guys, play their games and are healthy, honestly, all 5 of those guys could have been talking about getting the Heisman. Kyle, Mac, Najee, or Devontae. So that's crazy to think about, just that you had that much talent in one game offensively, and then, not to mention all the other guys who played. But it was an exciting game to watch all around.
So now before we go, as I said earlier, we're going to talk about this more next week because we still have 2 or 3 weeks before the college football playoff actually starts. So we're not going to give our predictions yet until next week. But I kind of wanted to see where you were at. I'm going to stay how I feel. I kind of already have. Alabama deserves to be in at number 1 or number 2. Clemson deserves to be in number 1 or number 2. Ohio State, on social media, I've complained about a lot of people on social media a little bit, and that might just be because people are just going to start stuff on Twitter and stuff, but people are kind of saying Ohio State didn't deserve to be in, but I don't understand how you could possibly look at that and say they shouldn't. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Ohio State is definitely one of the best teams in college football as a whole this year, and I don't know if they were being talked down on because they played a competitive game with Northwestern, who's been great this year. But I really just don't understand how you can say Ohio State doesn't deserve to be in. So I definitely think they should be in. And then at number 4, I'm not sure who really should have gotten in that spot. I think it should have been Texas A&M, but Texas A&M lost to the number 1 ranked team in the country. And Notre Dame lost to the number 2. So if a Notre Dame fan wants to make the argument that Texas A&M already lost, so did Notre Dame. And, the argument for Notre Dame was that they beat Clemson earlier in the year. But Clemson was playing with a backup true freshman quarterback who played really well, don't get me wrong. But you could tell the difference with Trevor Lawrence out there. But overall, we've bashed Notre Dame so much. And I think, in my opinion, there was no – I wouldn't say no reason for them to get in. It's understandable that they got in just because their name is Notre Dame, and that's the main reason they got in. But they are going to, I'm calling it right now. We haven't given our predictions yet. They are going to get blasted by Alabama, and I would put every dollar that I had on it. Alabama always covers, against teams that they're supposed to. The difference, I think, right now, or the point spread is, I think Alabama's favored by 19. I would bet that easily just because I really don't think highly of Notre Dame, and Alabama is the best team in football. So we'll see. But yeah, I just want to state that I really don't think Notre Dame should be in, and I want to see how you felt about that.
Yeah, man, I think, college football fans have fallen into that trap for far too long with Notre Dame. This isn't like the 60s or 70s anymore, or whatever era where they were, always dominant in. Since I've been, able to analyze football, Notre Dame has always fallen apart in championship level games. It's just not what they're good at. They can go 10-1, 11-1, 12-0 all day long, but they're going to lose. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter, what the bowl game is, where it's at. They're going to lose. And everyone saw that coming, man. I mean, they lost to Clemson 34 to whatever, and Clemson basically was chilling the entire second half. Just that second quarter alone told you that those teams were nothing alike in reality, and how much of a fluke that first game was. But, at the end of the day, we saw the team that was most capable of beating Bama besides, Clemson or Ohio State in Florida. And, there's no way of justifying putting a 3-loss team in there. Now, if Florida did what they were supposed to do against Texas A&M and for sure LSU, then without a doubt, Florida would have gotten that 4th spot, and they probably would have just had another rematch, which, really would have been nice to see more so than the game we're about to see, because Texas A&M got beat really bad by Alabama early on in the season, and I don't think there would have been much of a difference this time around. They were more deserving of it than Notre Dame. I'll say that, just because I don't want to see that happen again. The spread is 19. I would have Notre Dame losing by at least 30. It's just bound to happen, man. The best way to do it at least would have been to, shake up the game somehow, where, Bama plays Clemson and Ohio State plays Notre Dame or something like that. Just so we didn't get that Bama versus a number 4 team that they were guaranteed to beat by 100 points. But we can't do that. So, we are where we are right now, and everyone's going to have to sit through that, massacre of a game.
So now that is it for our episode. Thank you guys for watching, if you're still watching at this point. But I've stated in previous weeks that we're going to have some special guests come on, and we haven't had one for the past couple weeks, but I'm going to assure you we will have one soon. I don't know if that's in our next episode or after that, but we've reached out to a lot of people, and we've gotten a lot of responses actually. So it's been tough with the seasons going on. It's really hard to get an NFL player or even a college player to come on in the middle of their season. But we've even been able to do that with some guys. So as we see these seasons wrap up, we'll definitely have a great amount of guests come on and do some interviews with us. But like I said, thank you very much for watching, and please tune in again next week.
Yes, sir.